We're excited that we'll be capturing this content to share out on various channels. But hey, listen, we got two incredible leaders here with us. We got Liz from Stage to Capital. We got Richard from Insight Partners having a conversation about revenue acceleration and just kind of a spirited conversation to have some fun. So why don't you guys take it away?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,
TSA?
Yeah, there it is. Hi, Liz. How are you? It's been a minute. It's been a minute since I've seen you. But most importantly, before we jump into the real meaty content here, karaoke battle later on tonight. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Yeah.
I know you've had a minute to think about this.
I'm still embarrassed enough to say I just don't do karaoke, and I'm going to have to work on this. I am not a shy person.
Okay.
I'll get on stage, I'll talk about anything, but you asked me to sing, and it's just that feeling in my stomach. Oh no.
Maybe we come up with a song about revenue acceleration.
Maybe there could be a duet.
A duet. Oh,
Yeah.
Well, excited to be chatting with you here again today, and I think probably worth a quick intro about you, quick intro about me,
Love that.
and then we can talk a little bit more about some of the trends that we're seeing in our portfolio companies, the market at large, and some of the great things we're hearing here at Inbound. So Liz, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
All right, so we're going to go in order of earlier stage investor to later stage investor.
I think that's fine.
So my name's Liz. I am an operator turned investor. I started my career working for some small startups, got acquired into NetSuite, did an 8-year run at a public company running different parts of go-to-market there. My last couple years building out this worldwide BDR, inside sales, lead gen engine, which was awesome, and I'm gonna honestly say I'll never do a global role again. Covering Europe and Asia at the same time was not ideal. When I left, I went into venture, joined OpenView Venture Partners, incredible platform, loved what I was doing there, and had the itch to move a little bit earlier in the life cycle, both kind of putting my stamp on the development of a firm and also earlier in the life cycle of a company. So I'm at Stage 2 Capital now. I am a partner there investing in seed and A-round companies, all B2B software. And that's sort of like the natural lean into you guys. And look, we have a strong operating arm. We're really focused on go-to-market support for early stage companies.
That's great, and I'm excited to be joining with you. And then by way of background for our audience, Richard Sgro. I work at Insight Partners and took kind of a circuitous route to get there, much like Liz. I cut my teeth early in my career at Microsoft, actually, in product management and like real infrastructure, API level stuff. It's kind of nerdy stuff, which is fun. Of course, as one does, I joined a startup, ended up being a technical non-engineer, and they were like, hey, why don't you go do pre-sales engineering and solutions? And I was like, I don't know what that is. I worked at Microsoft. What does that role do? Ended up building and scaling a solutions engineering team. Went to another startup and did that. They went through some challenges in their revenue leader, and they said, do you want to run sales? And I said, no. And then they said, well, we'll make it worth your while. And I said, okay. And then from there, helped not only build and scale their sales engineering team, their professional services team, implementation, and the sales organization, where I first got the bug of kind of this considered holistic go-to-market. Spent some time building and leading a sales community, and now at Insight Partners, working with Insight has a variety of companies from very, very early stage to publicly traded. I actually have some overlap with Liz. I work with our companies that are pre-product market fit, really all the way up to about 15 million in revenue. And I love it because I think the word that comes to mind about those companies is swashbuckling. Swashbuckling is you have to kind of have this romantic element to work at an early stage company. You really have to love it, and you have to be a visionary in a way that later stage organizations don't. And it's fantastic to be a part of that and meet so many wonderful founders, so many that I see here in the audience today. But Liz, I want to actually jump in and kind of peel back the layers of the onion on some of the things we talked about before. And for folks kind of following along at home or in our audience, there's two pieces that are kind of coming together and coming apart throughout this conversation. So if you have questions, feel free to lean in with those. There's an element that we're starting to see of the consumerization of what it's like to be a B2B buyer, right? And for folks in the audience, like 15 years ago, you couldn't just swipe a credit card and try software. Like that's like a new thing. And just like you can, sign up for your Netflix subscription, you can sign up or cancel for a B2B SaaS tool today. And I think the other piece that we'll start to hit on a little bit too is the role that generative AI can play in this, right? We couldn't be at Inbound 2023 and not have at least some thoughts, some spicy takes maybe.
The orange elephant in the room.
On the orange elephant in the room.
Yeah.
But Liz, let's kind of start on that consumerization piece. How are you seeing that play out both in your life as someone who probably buys some software and as someone who invests in software companies?
I don't buy as much software as my inbox that is getting slammed by BDRs and AI would lead you to believe.
Thanks for the LinkedIn connection. Please buy my stuff.
I know. No, it's a really interesting topic, and I think you and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, but this kind of product-led growth was, in my mind, the first view of what we saw in the consumerization of B2B. And it really started with this idea of self-serve. There's a lot of different motions there. We see free trial, we see freemium, we see people putting their product much more on the forefront of their website and their content, trying to expose more of the product and value up front. But really that comes down to showing your customer value and showing them value before the paywall. And to me, those are the critical pieces that we're seeing evolve in real time. So when I look back, when we invested in OpenView at Calendly or in Datadog, it was like a pretty new motion.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like it was something that we didn't know necessarily how to value or how to think about how it was going to grow. And then we look at some of these, virality coefficients or network effects and how it spreads and word of mouth, and it's pretty incredible. I think that product-led motion is almost table stakes now for companies, and we're seeing the next evolution of it, which is way more oriented around learning about the buyer and how that customer buys.
Right.
And I know you've got some thoughts on the customer journey here and how that's changing, and that might be a good way to
Yeah, I think it's a great
land
segue.
here.
And it's funny, you think of virality with Calendly. I remember the first time I got one of those, and I was like, what is this? And then I was like, hold on, I can just go get it by clicking a button, pretty cool, but that's also quaint now.
Yep.
If we think about our buyers are evolving, and this isn't just lip service. If we look at the tools that we have access to as go-to-market leaders, if we look at the data that we have available to us as go-to-market leaders, if we look at who's buying and how much competition there is out there, it is a different animal than it was maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
My early SaaS career was in B2C marketing technology. And so when I look at what's happening in B2B, I see many similar things, right? Proliferation of tools. If you look at Tropic, Vendor, they release top 10 reports every quarter, top 10 solutions every quarter. In that top 10, sales engagement, lead intelligence, and prospecting. Also, if you look at those trends, you can see the same thing on their average sales price. Those tools, quarter over quarter, year over year, have increased in average sales price. So we've got way more ability to reach out and touch folks than we've ever had as B2B. Then why is it, what's going on? Because it takes so much more to connect with a prospect. It takes so much more to get somebody in the door to raise their hand to have a conversation, and sales performance is not great, right? I think average attainment, 58%, I think is what I saw from Closer IQ. So not where it needs to be. So it speaks that there's something going on there. I think the second piece of this is your buyer in B2B, right? Pre-pandemic, about a third of folks that were involved in buying B2B software were millennial, Zoomer, Gen Z. Now it's 2/3, right? Just in the span of the pandemic there. So that's a buyer who's used to growing up in this app-centric world, and they're used to saying, well, I don't know what to do. There's a bunch of tools out there. Liz, what did you do? What did you buy? What solution did you get, right? That consumer hat. And when they go to work.
And I want to try it, and I want to know it works.
And I want to know what it is, and I want to see it. And then if I don't like it, I'm not gonna keep going with it. And we're not going to work and putting on our B2B buyer pants and then coming home and putting on our B2C consumer shorts. Yeah. And the last piece, and I think this is the one that was staggering for me when I was doing some research here, the growth and the sheer volume of SaaS solutions out there. It's really tough to get data on this, but it was something like 15, 20,000 new SaaS solutions a year back 5 years ago. Now it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 SaaS tools a year, with projections being in the 70s by 2025. So you want to know what that feels like as a consumer, go to the toothpaste aisle at your grocery store. There's so much narrow variation across. Put that in a pot and you have a very consumerized buying experience, or you have a very consumer-like experience that are.
I know we're supposed to do this from the customer angle, but man, think about what that feels like as an investor.
Is investing hard? Is that tricky? I don't know.
30,000 a year, that's a wild number.
It's a staggering. It's also tough to get data on because there's so many, but part of this speaks to, it's so easy to start a company today, right? We could go, I think right now between you and I, we could come up with a great idea here with our audience.
Should we do that now?
Let's just do it, right? Get some Azure services, put a slick.
I got 100K credits for free, right?
Right.
We can get going.
Slick generative AI website using HubSpot AI, and we're cooking. We got a business, and that took, no joke, that would be very quick. 15 years ago, that was years of ideation to it.
Yeah.
And I think this other trend, this consumerization, right? I think it's interesting for sales. But Liz, I'd love your take on what this means for once you're actually a customer of a solution, because it makes an impact there too.
I think it's funny, as you were talking through that, something we didn't touch on earlier, but to me is becoming more and more critical, is this time to value component.
Absolutely.
And that you have so much less time to grab people's attention. You have so much less time to show value because there are so many alternatives. And so if you can't get a customer live, show them that it's working, and deliver on the expectations you set up front, you lose their attention.
Absolutely.
And more, I think we're seeing this shift away from an annual contract. You don't have as much time to prove it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's a good thing, because I think there was sometimes too much safety in that, right? Like, hey, we can kind of like take our time, and this pressure of like, hey, we need to go quick.
Well, it's like
That's
what we were
important.
talking about before with Klaviyo, right? There's a big belief in monthly contracts there. Why? Well, because it pushed pressure to add value back to your customers and push pressure on product and the organization. It might not work for everybody, but I love the spirit of that.
But conceptually, that time to value really matters, or they're going to be moving on to look at the next thing. And so we see that with a lot of companies we work with. It's constantly thinking about, how do we think about what is the thing we're promising up front, and are we setting the right expectations? How are we checking in on that, and then how are we delivering against it? And how do we get faster and better at that over time? And that post-sale piece to me is what's really critical, whether it's an AE, a solution consultant, CS, professional services, account management. There's a lot of different roles in this post-sale world right now. But I do think putting the customer at the center of it and thinking, what do they need from us? And how do we deliver on that quickly? And I know I was sharing the story earlier, but this concept of just reframing how we think about delivering value to the customer, I think for too long we have oriented in software around get on the phone, have a QBR, or have a kickoff call, or let me like spend an hour with you doing training and showing you how to do this. And with the consumerization of B2B, we're also seeing this like really like technically savvy group of people deploying software on the other side. And so, if they can get an answer in 3 minutes from your knowledge base and do the thing themselves, they would rather do that than wait 3 days to get on the phone with a CS person to show them. Now, there are still some people who want to do that, and we should give them that option.
Absolutely.
But we should constantly be challenging ourselves to look for ways that are more scalable and that actually can push us to deliver a better experience. But framing that experience matters.
I think it's a good call out, right? It's easy to get caught up in, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm just so excited to share this story, and I know everything about this problem, and I built it and I solved it, and I need to get it out there. But what you need to keep in mind is, I'm hiring your software to do a job. And that job, I may need to talk to you to do it, but I might not. I may want to talk to you about it, and I may not. But giving me those different paths gives me exactly what I'm expecting as a buyer and meeting me where they are. And I think that's tricky for a lot of folks, because if you think of the tools that we use, right, bringing it back to the tools, things move linearly through CRMs. They don't go backwards. They don't skip steps. And I asked this sometime of RevOps leaders, like, what happens if a deal goes backwards? And they go, well, that's impossible. And I was like, no, the system makes it difficult.
Well, you close the opportunity and then you do a new one, right?
Yeah, you do a new one, but then you jump it immediately to the previous stage, and it's just like, what? Like, that's kind of silliness. But that type of rigidity was taken as, that's just how software works. Therefore, we're going to subject you to that buyer, customer, whomever it might be. I think this is also an area where there is potential for generative AI to be very interesting. You mentioned kind of that knowledge base and getting that out there. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about how you're seeing it kind of play out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, man, AI is like taking us by storm right now in every area of a business, and it's really awesome to see the creativity and the like level of experimentation and what things can be done with it. Knowledge base in particular is an interesting one. I think that there is absolutely an angle there where AI can play a role. But I actually think it's really critical that you understand the business processes first, that you really understand what your customer is trying to do. And then where I'm actually using AI with that is thinking about, how do I make this clearer? How do I have it challenge me to make it shorter, to create a level of understanding that is not, hey, I'm an expert in this software, but I'm learning it. And so I think we actually can be using AI in like really interesting ways to deliver a better customer experience there. Look, that's one example. We're seeing Gen AI throughout the tech stack. I'd love to understand like where you're seeing it applied the most in your portfolio companies in particular.
I think that there's a desire to experiment with it, which is always exciting to see, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're in software. I often come back to some of the first principles that we had talked about over coffee this morning, where you can't Gen AI yourself out of an incorrectly set up sales process, poor ideal customer profile, et cetera. It's good additive, but if you're not careful, you feed it bad data, you feed it incorrect data. It's just like sales engagement tools were in the early days, where I have the ability to really do amazing things with my business, or I could go through and do some very harmful things to it. Where I see it having the most impact is on some of, and again, these aren't the bleeding edge scenarios for the real folks that are out there, but really the basics of, I do an event like what we're having here today, our audience sees it, we record something, we transcribe that. That can get converted into fantastic pieces of content. I can now personalize different landing pages for key members of my ideal customer profile, whether it's by role or organization. That used to take a lot of effort for the product marketing team. That used to take a lot of effort for the folks creating the web pages, and you didn't even have the data on who was coming to your website in the same way, so you couldn't personalize. All of that feedback loop is super small. Right now, it's very low risk as well. The hallucination, because the product marketer is still in the loop, the product marketer still knows the story, they can look and go, no, we're not going to put that up on the website. Or, oh yeah, no, this is perfect. This is exactly what we want to personalize. I think that's the starting point for high leverage. For sales, I do love more of the classic application of more sophisticated regression modeling.
Sure.
So looking at, you've got this massive amount of data, everyone who's ever been in an opportunity, every account that you've ever talked to, all that, start to answer some of the questions.
Your CRM is a trove of data, and a lot of the data may not be perfect, but there's a lot that we are not mining.
And you've got maybe one analyst on it, like maybe if you're lucky.
Maybe.
But like, well, we can get like an army of 25-year-old analysts through different tools that are out there, put that on it and say, oh wow, if we do a trial and they try this feature and they're in this industry, they have significantly higher lifetime value. CAC might be a teeny bit higher, right? Because we spend a little bit more time with them upfront, but we get to 3x LTV over the first year. And so I think that starts to speak to a shift in go-to-market efficiency versus just straight up growth.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You just touched on it too as you were talking about the product marketer, but that concept of Toby saying like the intern test, that really resonated with me. I think we're letting a little bit too much of this just sort of loose in the world, and it's giving people this scared reaction of, should I be feeding this whatever tool, insert any name here, right? Should I be giving it my data? Should I be letting it loose to do this work? If you think of it as an intern, this is a support function to help you do your job more efficiently. You're still accountable for what is put out in the world, so make sure it's right, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's well written. Like, don't just take this output as like, we're ready to go.
Well, and I think it's very pragmatic advice, but I think the other side of that is also true, right? If you look at other trends that you're seeing in the workforce, this idea of fractional work. There may be a future state where we come up with our little great idea here, we go get our Azure credits and we come up with it, and then like we hire fractionally a CTO, 2 engineers, and a fantastic product manager, and they like build it for us, and then they're done, and they want to go do other fractional work, and we've got a product that's ours with our team of 3 or 4 people. So it's not just revenue efficiency from a go-to-market standpoint, it's more almost ARR per employee and efficiency like that we may start to see for folks on the opposite end that are like, I got nothing, I'm going to share it all, and I'm going to build my business on the backbone of these generative AI tools.
I think we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, we're already seeing a lot of that. And it is actually really interesting too. I mean, we're deviating from our original topic here, but that's fine. I do think, as particularly in like the fundraising cycles, I am seeing, I mean, such a focus on efficiency, but it's amazing what people are able to accomplish using some of these tools that are out there now, where you look at it and you're like, yes, you have built a really interesting software product, but some of the underlying business functions that you have just approached in a really first principles way, and not taken as, hey, I need to staff 6 CS people to make this work.
Right, or even if you remember back, I think probably when you were at OpenView, right, it was like, how many engineers do you have, right? Like that was like the litmus test of your company. And it's like, my goodness, well, maybe that's the right way to look at things, but like, maybe there's another way of like, are they producing quality, velocity, and great software? We've got a couple minutes left here. I will be curious for your thoughts on the humans that we have in role, right? Like if we think of this new world of buyer centricity, how does that change maybe who we hire in sales, customer success, marketing? Like, what do those profiles look like, let's say 5 years down the road?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm like getting my future like
just
ball
molds,
out.
just
like,
yeah.
What are we seeing in the future here? Look, I think we've talked a lot about it on the sales front. Ironically, I don't think it's changing as much as we think. The one shift that I will call out that we haven't talked about is I do think there is an opportunity with these smaller teams that are more efficient to rethink like exactly what the profile looks like and move from what was kind of like this mass hiring view of like we're gonna have tons of BDRs and tons of junior reps that we're grooming into mid-market, into enterprise. And that we're probably going to see a real focus on like, not necessarily more senior, but our top talent producing at a rate of like 3, 4, 5x, not like 50% more than in the past, and figuring out how to support those cycles. And that means empathetic reps, that means really well trained, really well enabled, who understand the product, who know how to work with a customer. But I don't think that looks different than a great rep today. I just think we're going to make them more efficient. And I also think we're going to find that there are some stellar people out there who are figuring out how to use these tools to their advantage, and there is going to be a leapfrog moment where there is a set of people that is left behind in the movement, and we're going to have to figure out how do we take the learnings from these really top tier and start rolling it down.
Well, I think it's like Dharmesh said yesterday in the keynote, right? His child is Generation AI. Like it's just like that's just who it is, and that's the next iteration of the workforce. Yeah. I think it's a fantastic point. And it's like, is it as easy as hiring conscientious, empathic people who can tell stories and learn products? Yeah, that's pretty much what sales has been for, I mean, pretty much since we started selling stuff whenever.
Well, you came through the solution consulting side, which is definitely a different angle, this sort of like more technical bent. Like, how do you feel like that fits into this?
I think that the domain expertise, the ability to translate kind of complex technical astronaut speak, for lack of a better word, into like business is a superpower that solutions engineers, depending on the company that they're at, do start to develop. I was super fortunate to then cut all the way over into sales at a company that had a super complex platform integration-centric story. Yeah. So you couldn't sell without some of that. And if I look at the best reps that worked for me while they were there, they were folks who like, were they as technical as a professional engineer and sales engineer? No, but could they spin and understand technically what we would do, help a customer understand how it would help them alleviate their problems, and really
lead
kind
with
of
value.
Exactly. So, well, Liz, it's been great chatting with you here today. For folks that are at Inbound, what's next for you? Are you headed to Comp Plan Survivor?
Comp Plan Survivor, doing a workshop this afternoon, and otherwise we'll be waiting to see you do your lip sync karaoke tonight.
Excellent. All right, folks. Well, thank you all so much in the audience. Any questions for folks that are sitting there?
How you doing? Can you hear me? Perfect. Great talk. Really love the focus on generative AI. I'm a big fan of it. Use it for everything, right? One of the big concerns that I have with it is this idea of the dead internet theory, which is that generative AI is going to create so much content. It's going to be so powerful at manipulating the algorithms that we're actually just going to see basically robot content everywhere on the front page of Google. Further, the comments within those pages are going to be other generative AI platforms interacting with it. And essentially, there's a concern, at least I have a concern, that like marketing as we know it is going to collapse because there aren't going to be actual human interactions there. How do you foresee that impacting marketing within the next 5-10 years? Are we going to go back to, like, I've seen free PG models where people are giving out free water bottles that have marketing on it, for instance? What are your thoughts, or what trends have you seen?
I have a couple initial thoughts.
I have a lot of thoughts on this too. I mean, this reminds me in a lot of ways of the early days of sales engagement, right? You can email everybody, so everybody emailed everybody. Marketers sometimes create trouble for themselves, right? If we remember, we didn't have canned spam, then we had email marketing, then we had canned spam. We didn't have threading on iOS, and then everybody realized SMS and local notifications are a great way to market. Now we have threading in iOS. So I think it changes the role of marketing to more enablement of buyers when they raise their hand and say they're ready. Because to your point, the content, and I bet it's all going to be really good. And if we believe that there's a lot of SaaS solutions that look the same, all producing really good content, what are we left with? And I had a chuckling moment about this. Last week, there was an SDR who posted on LinkedIn and said, I'm one meeting short of quota. Can you all help me? 25 meetings sourced. I think it was something like 200K in pipeline generated, right? Well, why? Because that was a known good quantity. That SDR was somebody who people knew. Yeah. So personal brand may start to play a role in that of both how your organization shows up outside of your control, Glassdoor, G2, et cetera, and the brand of the seller. So you've got maybe senior, maybe junior, maybe different.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I also think in kind of going the same direction, I think those like personal stories are going to be the thing that cuts through. So whether that's telling your customer stories, telling your personal story, like how do you bring human voice back into it? That might be shorter content, that might be longer content. Like we can play that game all day long, but I do think there is an aspect of like what is something that cannot be generated? What is something that's really core to an individual? The other thing that I keep thinking about that I have not wrapped my head around fully yet is like, I think websites are going to need to change quite a bit. And as you think about the deterministic nature of AI and like what we do when we interact with like ChatGPT, just as an example, pick anyone, like when we ask questions and it is reading the web for information, the way we currently present information on websites does not actually align to that. And so if you are going to ask it, hey, which sales engagement tool should I use? And it's, you know, reading the websites of all the ones that are out there, there is going to be probably a set of pages that gets spun up that is like specifically oriented around like, I want to be the answer when I'm like, that question is asked of AI. I don't know what that looks like yet, but this is something I've like been noodling on.
I think there's probably some truth to it too,
like,
right?
We can't use all this marketing speak. We have to be like really clear in our communication so that it understands.
Bring it back to your knowledge base model, right? And I think that was what Channing was talking about before, and Maha on the panel earlier, of this intersection between the role more technical language can play in marketing, and the intersection of how solution engineering could roll into a little bit more of a marketing function for that very reason. If all the marketing speak is the same, but the APIs work differently, we've got to bridge that gap somehow.
Yeah.
Great question.
Awesome. Well, let's give Richard and Liz a big round of applause. Thank you guys so much for being with us. Amazing job.